Okay, so you've sent over a ton of stuff about poverty and how we make sense of it, how to actually measure it, and it's a really big topic.
It
There's
is.
so many different ways to look at it.
Definitely.
I mean, even just defining it can get complicated.
Yeah, for sure.
Our goal today is to really boil it down to get to the core of how we understand poverty
Sounds good.
without, getting bogged down in super technical jargon.
Right.
You've given us research on how poverty is actually measured,
Yes.
and then some of the fundamental theories about why it exists in the first place.
Uh-huh.
So think of this deep dive as your shortcut
I like that.
to getting a handle on the essentials.
The essentials, yeah.
Okay.
I think what's really cool about the sources you sent
Yeah.
is that they highlight how poverty isn't just, one thing with a single easy explanation.
Right.
We're going to unpack some of the main ways it's approached.
Okay.
Both in terms of literally measuring it
Mm.
and also the deeper principles behind it. So you can start connecting those dots and
Yeah.
see that bigger picture.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay, let's dive right in then.
Let's do it.
One of the first things that always comes up with poverty
Mm-hmm.
is this idea of absolute poverty.
Yeah.
Can you break that down for us? What does that actually tell us?
So at its most basic,
Yeah.
absolute poverty is all about whether or not people have enough just to survive.
Okay.
It's like a bare minimum.
Right.
You set a fixed poverty line,
Mm-hmm.
and it's based on what it costs for the absolute essentials,
Okay.
like food,
Food.
shelter, basic clothing.
Got it.
The World Bank, for example, uses an international poverty line.
Okay.
Their 2022 data put it at $2.15 a day.
$2.15 a day.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if someone's living on less than that,
Mm-hmm.
they're considered to be in extreme poverty.
Okay, so that gives us a pretty clear picture
It does.
of who's facing the most severe hardship.
Yeah, on a global scale.
Globally?
Yes.
Okay.
And this way of measuring poverty has been really important for tracking progress.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing if we're actually reducing extreme poverty worldwide
Okay.
and figuring out, which populations need the most help.
Makes sense.
It's a consistent benchmark, so we can check if global efforts are really working,
Yeah.
especially for those at the very lowest income levels.
At the very bottom.
Yes.
Okay, but I imagine this measure doesn't really capture the whole story,
Right.
especially in wealthier countries.
Like,
$2.15 a day is going to look really different depending on where you are in the world,
for sure.
which you can actually buy the quality of life.
Huge difference.
So that brings us to relative poverty, right?
Yes.
How is that different?
Okay, so relative poverty,
Uh-huh.
it shifts away from that fixed survival line,
Yeah, okay.
and instead it defines poverty in comparison to the average standard of living within a specific country.
So it's all relative.
It's about looking at the income distribution and identifying those who are much worse off than most people.
I see.
One common way to do this
Yeah.
actually comes from Peter Townsend's work back in 1979.
Okay.
He said, someone's considered poor
Yeah.
if their income falls below a certain percentage,
Okay.
usually like 50 or 60%
Uh-huh.
of what the typical person in that country makes,
Of the median income.
right? The median income.
Got it.
So in a country with a high overall income,
Yeah.
that relative poverty line is also going to be higher.
Higher. Yeah, even if basic things like food, which
Exactly.
don't actually cost that much more.
Exactly.
It's about where you stand compared to everyone else.
It's about your relative position.
Okay, so relative poverty is really highlighting inequality
It is.
within a particular society.
It's about more than just having enough food to eat.
Right.
It's about being able to fully participate in society,
Okay.
having the resources to, do things,
Yeah.
enjoy things,
Right.
and feel a sense of belonging and dignity.
Dignity within your community.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got absolute poverty,
Yeah.
the global baseline, and then we've got relative poverty,
Right.
which tells us more about inequality within a specific country.
Exactly.
But I remember from the sources, and
Yeah.
relative poverty has its critics too,
It does.
especially in those wealthier nations.
It does, particularly in more affluent countries.
Why is that?
Well, the argument is that
Yeah.
in countries with strong social safety nets,
Okay.
even if someone's income is below that relative line,
Uh-huh.
they might still have access to important things
Okay.
like healthcare,
Okay, sure.
education,
Okay.
and unemployment benefits.
Right. Yeah.
So even though their income might be relatively low,
Yeah.
they might not actually be experiencing
Well,
severe hardship
Because they're being supported.
because they have access to these essential services.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's where the capability approach comes in.
Okay. This one sounds like a whole different way of thinking about poverty.
It is. It's a real shift.
Okay.
It's not just about how much money you have
Okay.
or even just material resources.
Right.
Amartya Sen, the guy who developed this approach, he argued that poverty is really about a lack of freedom and opportunity.
Freedom and opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about the inability to live a life that you value.
That you have reason to value.
Exactly.
I like that.
So it's not just about the numbers in your bank account.
Uh-huh.
It's about what you can actually do with those resources.
What you can do.
What you can be.
Okay.
Imagine two people, both with really low incomes.
Okay.
One of them lives in a community with free healthcare
Okay.
and good public transportation.
Right.
The other person doesn't have access to those things.
Right.
Even though they have the same amount of money,
Uh-huh.
their capabilities of what they can actually do
What they can do.
are totally different.
Totally different.
So it's about more than just income. It's about things like your health,
Okay.
your education, your social network,
your support system.
yeah, and even the political and social environment you live in.
That's so interesting.
All of these things shape your actual capabilities.
What you can actually do.
Exactly.
So this approach is really getting at like a much deeper
It is
understanding of what it means to be poor.
a more nuanced understanding.
And this idea of capabilities leads to the Multidimensional Poverty Index.
Yes. The MPI,
The MPI.
developed by Alkire and Foster,
Okay.
they wanted to put these ideas into practice.
So how does the MPI actually work?
It tries to measure poverty in this more holistic way.
Okay.
It goes beyond just income.
Right.
It looks at multiple aspects of poverty at the same time
Okay.
for a specific person or household.
Uh-huh.
So we're talking about things like education.
Okay. Like how many years of schooling they have.
Right. Or if their kids are enrolled in school,
Okay.
health is another big one,
Health.
like child mortality rates,
Yes.
nutrition.
Nutrition. Okay.
And then there's living standards.
Okay. So things like access to clean water.
Yes. Clean water,
Sanitation.
sanitation, electricity,
Juicy.
housing, all of that.
So someone might not be considered income poor
Right.
by those other measures we talked about.
Exactly.
But if they don't have clean water
Yeah.
or their kids aren't in school,
Yeah.
the MPI would flag them.
It would say they're multidimensionally poor.
It's a much broader way
right.
of looking at what it means to experience deprivation.
It paints a more complete picture
I like that.
of all the different ways people can be deprived.
Okay.
But of course, it's not perfect.
What do you mean?
Well, implementing and measuring the MPI can be tricky.
How so?
There are a lot of choices involved,
Like what?
like which dimensions to include, how much weight to give each one,
Okay.
and then just making sure the data is collected consistently.
Yeah. Across different places.
Across different regions and countries, that's really important.
So it's pretty clear that even defining and measuring poverty is a whole big thing.
It's a complex process.
With different methods highlighting different aspects and coming with their own pros and cons.
Yeah, there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Okay, so we've explored the how of counting poverty.
We have.
Now let's dig into the why.
Okay, the why.
Why does it exist in the first place?
Big question.
According to these different schools of thought,
Yeah.
the first one that comes up in our sources is this structural functional perspective. Sounds very academic.
It does a little bit.
What's the basic idea there?
Okay, so the structural functional perspective.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It offers a pretty unexpected view.
Okay. It suggests that poverty might actually have a function in society.
A function.
Yeah, a purpose.
A purpose.
Really?
This idea was articulated by Davis and Moore
Okay.
back in 1945.
A while ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did they say?
They said that societies are structured with different roles, and some roles are considered more important than others.
Okay, like a hierarchy.
Yeah, kind of like a hierarchy.
Okay.
And to make sure those important roles are filled by the most qualified people,
Right.
society offers them more rewards.
More rewards. Okay.
So poverty, in this view, exists at the bottom of that hierarchy.
Okay.
It provides a pool of people
Yeah.
for the jobs that are less desirable.
Less desirable and lower paying.
Exactly.
Right.
But those jobs still need to be done.
Right.
Imagine a pyramid.
Okay.
You need people at the bottom doing those essential but less prestigious jobs for the whole thing to function.
I'll hold it up.
Yeah, to hold it up.
Okay.
So this perspective argues that the lower rewards at the bottom
Yeah.
even though they lead to poverty,
Right.
they also incentivize people to try to move up.
To aim for those higher level jobs.
Yeah, to aim for those higher level, more important roles.
So in a way, it's saying that poverty is necessary.
It is a bit unsettling.
It is.
Yeah, it can feel like it's excusing inequality.
Yeah, like it's saying it's okay
Right.
for some people to be poor.
And that's a common criticism of this perspective.
Okay.
People argue that it overlooks the systemic barriers.
Barrier.
Yeah, the things that actually trap people in poverty.
Right. And it definitely minimizes the suffering
It does.
and injustice
Absolutely.
that come with being poor.
Doesn't really address that side of things.
Okay, so that's the structural functional perspective.
Yes.
And then our sources bring up the conflict perspective.
Right, a very different view.
Which comes from Karl Marx.
Yes. His work in 1867.
How does that explain poverty?
Okay, so the conflict perspective.
Yeah.
It takes a much more critical look at how society is structured.
Okay.
It argues that poverty isn't a necessary function at all. It's actually a consequence
A consequence?
of power imbalances and the way capitalist systems work. The main idea is that the economic system
Yeah.
is often set up to benefit the wealthy and powerful.
The elite.
The elite, exactly.
At the expense of everyone else.
Yeah, at the expense of the working class and those with fewer resources.
So this leads to inequality.
Yes, an unequal distribution of wealth and opportunities.
And that results in poverty.
Right, poverty for a significant portion of the population.
So it's not just about certain jobs being less attractive.
No, it's not about that.
It's about the system itself.
It's about the system being rigged.
Or rigged.
Yeah, in favor of those at the top.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
It is, and it helps explain things.
Like what?
Like the growing gap between the rich and poor.
Right.
The influence of big corporations, and how some government policies can actually make inequality worse.
Intentionally or not.
Right. Whether it's on purpose or not.
So this perspective is really saying that the system itself creates poverty.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not just an unfortunate byproduct.
It's baked in.
It's baked into the system.
But our sources mention that this view might be a little too focused on economics.
Yes.
Like, there are other things that contribute to poverty
Right.
that it doesn't fully account for.
Exactly.
So what are some of those other factors?
Well, economic factors are definitely important,
Of course.
but poverty is complex.
Right.
It can also be driven by things like discrimination
Okay.
based on race,
Race.
gender,
Whoa.
other social categories,
Okay.
lack of access to good education and healthcare, political instability,
Okay.
environmental challenges.
All of these things play a role.
They do.
So while the conflict perspective is great for highlighting economic inequality,
Yeah.
it doesn't always capture that whole intricate
It
web
doesn't capture all the nuances.
of other contributing factors. So we've got economic exploitation.
Yes.
But then there are also those situations
Right.
where cultural or political factors
Yeah.
can create and sustain poverty, even without that direct economic exploitation.
Exactly.
Real.
Like political corruption
Okay.
or longstanding social exclusion based on ethnicity.
Right, those systemic issues.
Yes.
Okay, so then our sources bring up a whole other approach, this people-centered development approach.
Yes.
With Robert Chambers' work in 1983.
That's right.
This one sounds like a totally different way of thinking about how to tackle poverty.
It really is. So the people-centered development approach,
Yeah.
it moves away from just focusing on economic growth
Okay.
and those top-down solutions.
Yeah.
Instead, it's about empowering local communities.
Empowering communities.
Yes, and giving people a real say
A say in what?
in their own development.
In how things change.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the main principle here
Yeah.
is that we should focus on improving people's well-being,
Okay.
their autonomy.
Their ability to make their own choices.
Exactly. And their ability to control their own futures.
Instead of just focusing on their income.
Right. It's not just about money.
Okay.
It's about empowering them.
Got it.
It's about participatory development.
What's that?
It means valuing local knowledge,
Okay.
local resources, and actually involving people
Yeah.
in the decisions that affect their lives.
That makes a lot of sense.
The goal is to create sustainable change.
Yeah.
Change that comes from within the community.
From the ground up.
From the ground up, exactly.
So instead of just giving aid,
Right.
it's about empowering people
It is.
to be the drivers of change themselves.
That's the idea.
That's powerful.
It is a powerful concept.
But I imagine it's not always easy to put this into practice.
You're right.
What are some of the challenges?
Well, shifting power dynamics and truly empowering marginalized communities that can face a lot of resistance.
From who?
From people in power.
Okay.
From those who benefit from the status quo. And these locally driven initiatives, they often need money.
Of course.
And technical support.
Which can be hard to come by.
It can be.
Especially consistently.
Yes. Long-term support is essential.
So it's a great idea.
It is.
But making it work takes real commitment.
It does.
So we've gone through all these different ways of measuring and understanding poverty.
Yeah.
And it's become so clear
I think so.
that there's no single answer.
There isn't.
We have to look at it from multiple perspectives.
All these different angles.
To really start to get it.
Exactly.
Okay, so to recap.
Okay.
We started with absolute poverty.
Yes.
Focusing on those basic survival needs.
Uh-huh.
Then relative poverty.
Right.
Which highlights inequality within a society.
Within a specific context.
Then we talked about Sen's capability approach.
Yes.
Which emphasizes freedom.
Freedom, opportunity.
And the ability to live a life you value.
A life worth living.
And finally, the MPI, which gives us that holistic view.
That broader perspective.
Of deprivation.
Exactly.
Then we explored those three theoretical perspectives.
Yeah.
The structural, functional, the conflict, and the people-centered development approaches.
Three very different ways of looking at it.
Each one providing a unique lens on why poverty persists and how we might address it.
And how we might tackle this global challenge.
And remember, you, our listener, came to us with all these sources.
That's right.
Because you want to understand this complex topic.
A complex issue, for sure.
And I think the biggest takeaway here is that these different frameworks, they're not competing with each other.
You're not.
They're actually offering different but complementary pieces of the puzzle.
They each provide valuable insights.
So by understanding them all, we can develop a much more complete picture.
And a more nuanced understanding.
Of this incredibly complex issue.
That's the goal.
We move beyond that simple idea.
Yes.
Of poverty just being a lack of money.
It's so much more than that.
And we start to see all those social and cultural and political factors that are intertwined with it.
They're all connected.
So to wrap it all up,
we've
really explored poverty from all angles.
We have.
The different ways to measure it. And the various theories that try to explain it.
Those deeper explanations.
And this broader understanding is key to developing more effective. And more importantly, more equitable.
Absolutely. Solutions that actually work.
For alleviating poverty.
For making a real difference.
Around the world.
Around the world.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive.
It has.
And now for a final thought. For you, our listener.
Yes.
To ponder.
To ponder.
Considering all these different ways of understanding poverty, everything we've talked about today.
All the different approaches.
What single factor do you believe has the biggest impact?
The biggest impact.
Either on making poverty worse or on alleviating it.
Alleviating it.
In the world today.
That's a big question.
It is. It's something to really think about.
A lot to unpack there.
Maybe do some more digging on your own.
Yeah, explore those ideas further.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope it's given you
I hope so.
a solid understanding.
The comprehensive understanding
of this really important topic.
It's a crucial issue.
Until next time.
See you then.